Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Patty Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hi, everyone. It is Wednesday night, and that means it is time for Friends and Fiction. It is the happiest night of the week, and we're so happy that you are here. I am Patty Callahan Henry.
I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
I'm Kristen Harmel.
Christy Woodson Harvey.
And we're starting off with a rockin' start here.
Starting with a bang.
Names are hard.
Our names, alphabetical listings are difficult. Anyway, this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Tonight, we are so excited. We are going to be talking with the author Jayne Allen about her series that began with Black Girls Die Exhausted and just out, her new one, Black Girls Must Be Magic. We'll talk about debuts, about series, about how it felt to be on Good Morning America, and so much more with her.
And as you know, we continue to encourage you to support independent booksellers when and where you can. And one way to do that is to visit our own Friends and Fiction bookshop.org page, where you can find Jayne's books and books by the 4 of us and our past guests at a discount.
And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for the overwhelming tidal wave of love and support and prayers that my family and I felt after we lost my daughter Katie last week from complications of COVID. You know, so many of you have asked what they can do for me and for our family. So I'm going to tell you what I've told everybody who asks. Be kind, get vaxxed, and make every day count. Now, don't forget, our spring box is now available for order from our friends at Oxford Exchange. Order now and receive Christie's The Wedding Veil in March, my The Homewreckers in May, and a special Friends and Fiction notebook complete with sticky flags for marking all your favorite pages with all the F-bombs. I don't think Christy puts F-bombs in her books, but I've been known to.
It's a treasure.
You know, the nice thing about the sticky notes is you can insert F-bombs. Just write them on the sticky note and put it right in.
That's a great idea.
If you find my book lacking, just insert them in there yourself where appropriate.
It's a treasure hunt of F-bombs.
All right, we're in the second month of our very first Friends and Fiction reading challenge. So each month of the year, there'll be a different reading prompt. And we challenge you not only to complete all 12 months, but also to keep track of what you've read this year. One way to do that is with our beautiful reading journal designed by us in conjunction with independent bookstore Oxford Exchange. This month's prompt, as many of you know, is memoir or nonfiction. And our friend Anissa Armstrong has posted the graphic in our announcements, and we cannot wait to see what all of you have chosen to read.
All right, y'all ready to welcome our guest for the evening?
I am.
Yeah.
Jayne Allen has authored 4 nonfiction books in addition to the first 2 books in her Black Girls Must Die Exhausted trilogy. She writes her fiction novels out of life experiences, calling every chapter fragments of reality strung together by imagination.
Her series, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, touches upon contemporary women's issues such as workplace womanhood, race, modern relationships, fertility, and mental health.
Jayne is originally from Detroit, which we were just talking about. I was saying how much I like it there. And she's a serial entrepreneur, a Harvard trained attorney, and an engineer. She also founded Book Genius, a full service online book marketing and author branding course coming early this year.
Ooh.
I was going to say,
right?
we might need to sign up.
Yeah.
I know, exactly.
The second novel in her series, Black Girls Must Be Magic, was just released earlier this month. Sean, can you bring Jayne on for us?
Hello.
Hi, Jayne.
We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I wear my sparkles. Special occasion calls for
I
sparkles.
like your sparkles. I actually like the color of your sparkles. It looks like it might be for Auburn University. I'm just saying.
It looks red to me.
It looks
more
orange
like-
to me. What color is it, Jayne? We're going to settle.
It's red. I think it's a reddish orange. So it's supposed to be red for Valentine's Day ishness. So
red.
Which is
I like it.
it's just trying to be nice with the orange. All right. We are so happy to have you here. And it has been so fun watching this series just burst onto the scene. Probably not as much fun as it's been for you. So before we take a deep dive, can you tell our readers a little bit about these books?
Sure. So I'm so excited again to be here, and hello to everybody. Black Girls Must Die Exhausted is a series that talks. I call it the epitaph of my 30s. So basically, I wish somebody had handed me this book when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. But it centers the story of Tabitha Walker, and she is a woman in her early 30s. She's 33 years old and living in Los Angeles. She happens to be a Black woman, and she thinks she's living her best life. And we meet her on her very worst day when she finds out that that is not at all what's happening. And that checklist that she had goes right out the window because she finds out that she has an infertility issue, which is kind of how that happens to people, where all of a sudden it's not something that you find out when there's a whole bunch of time. A lot of times it's just one of those things that comes upon you, and it just starts to unravel her perfect life, and her unraveling causes the unraveling of all of the people around her, her friends, her family, and she's got to deal with her complex family history and figure out for herself what fulfillment looks like, not according to societal definitions anymore, but for her own internal compass. And it's about finding your voice. It's about finding the courage to live fulfillment on your own terms, and just a story of authenticity. And it just happens to be from this particular woman's perspective, which layers in the experiences of race and what workplace dynamics are about. And it's hopefully a delight to go along with her, and somebody that you really can root for.
It is a delight. And by the opening pages, your voice, you're along for the ride.
Thank you.
I love that. Well, as you just mentioned, at the beginning of this series, you said I wrote the book that I wish someone had handed to me. And I also read that you said the title might have come to me before the book concept did. It occurred to me in a period where I was feeling unseen, unprotected, and uncelebrated as a Black woman specifically. Can you talk to us just about that very initial spark for this novel and what made you choose that title?
Sure. So in my life, the way that I view books, and when I'm in a bookstore, and I've always thought this, even since I was a little girl, that people put the best parts of themselves in books. And I thought, wow, if you really have to have something important that you have to share that's really good to take the time to write a book and to put in a book. So whenever I go into a bookstore or be in a library, in my mind, I'd always envision that I was like bathed in this golden light of goodness and positivity. I would, even when I'd have problems, or like feel down, I would go find myself to a bookstore for like an answer, or just for good vibes. So when I felt like I needed to do something good, and that there was something good that was needed, the first instinct for me is always to write in a book. And for Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, this was my first time to think, oh, maybe I can do fiction, because I tried this with nonfiction. And what I guess sparked that for me was that feeling of feeling unseen, and we were in this period where it was just unrelenting on the news. Somebody died at the hands of the police, or it was something else happening, or being told that you're not enough in one way or another, and dealing with the issues of gender and race, and all of it compounded into this big snowball. And around that time, and I felt like if I am feeling this way, if I'm feeling unprotected, unseen, unsafe, uncelebrated, I can only imagine what other women are feeling like, other women similarly situated and other women not. And I wanted to do something that was going to acknowledge the weight of the times that we're living in, but also create a celebration to say, wow, but look who we are in spite of this. Like, just to celebrate being a woman, celebrate being a Black woman, but just generally celebrate womanhood from all the different perspectives and layers. And there's so many perspectives in this book, because there's there's characters beyond Tabby, and there's other perspectives. So I just thought that it was possible to write a book that would be both an acknowledgement and a celebration. And the word exhausted came to me to describe how I was feeling. And what I was hoping to do was to provide context to that and provide perspective. So looking at your life, I think for all of us, we're living a word and we don't realize it. And I realized that the word I was living at that time was exhausted. And I woke up to that. And I decided that's not the word I would choose for myself. If I'm looking back at all of my days, at the end of a lifespan, and if that word was exhausted that I was living, like, that is not my word. So I decided that I wanted to change that meaning and try to do that through the story first. And so in the story, you see the word exhausted change its meaning, and this whole phrase change its meaning. So it starts out as an acknowledgement, and then it turns into a celebration, and then it winds up being a call to adventure and fulfillment and finding your word, and whether it's exhausted with a different meaning or something else, it's sort of about finding your word.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And claiming it. I mean, that's an incredible message for all of us, I think, is, none of us want our word to be exhausted. You're absolutely right.
Right. I mean, our head's got to be running right now. What is our word? What is our word?
I know. I've been thinking that.
Yeah.
Jayne, I think it's not just about finding our word, but these books are so much about finding your family beyond your family, right? I mean, women and family bonds are so incredibly important in both of these books. So, Tabitha would not have made it through without the love and the friendships that she's able to surround herself with, which is just like us here. I mean, that's, we talk a lot about that, the love and the friendship that we all share. Can you talk to us about diving into these deep bonds? And did you know that they would, in many ways, be the backbone of the novel?
Well, it seems like for me, thinking about my life as living in the layers that I've lived as a woman, as a Black woman in this society, and I've been single, and what is my life like? What's important? And the connecting tissue has been my relationships with other women. And it's just that friendship, and in a lot of ways, those relationships wind up being our soulmate relationships. That's where we get our strength from. That's where we get our support from. It's a beautiful thing, and I wanted to celebrate that. And she also, Tabitha, she is seeking to have her own family, and partially because, as we find out early on in the story, her family is really dysfunctional. It feels dysfunctional, except for one particular relationship, and that's with her grandmother. And her grandmother happens to be white, and that's an interesting part to the story, but it's neither here nor there, other than the fact that relationship is just one of pure love and intimacy. And I loved writing that relationship because it transcends everything. And in society, I think we've been living in these divisive times where we're being led to believe that there's so much that separates us. But once you put love at the center, you realize that there's nothing more important and there's nothing stronger. So it was so important to me to write that relationship and to show that, and to give them the space to explore everything from that center point of love and connection. And with her friends, it's the same thing. They're so imperfect. Their friendship's so imperfect. They are, they're busy, they're wrong about each other, they can be catty.
They're funny. They're so funny.
Thank you. I loved writing the friends and just, all of the hijinks and how they could be catty with each other and misunderstand and kind of be like, and Tabby sometimes is a little bit of an unreliable narrator because it's in first person. That was fun, but it was important to me for their friendship to be imperfect because it's still perfect. They're still there for each other, and to just show that we can be imperfect, we can have the jagged edges, we can be broken, but when it comes down to it in our friendships, we show up for each other, and it's perfect the way that we manage.
I was wondering hearing you talk, Jayne, if you always knew that you would write Tabby first person, or if you tried it other ways.
That is such a good question. So it came to me as first person, and again, this is my first novel, so as an experienced writer, it's really difficult to do as first person.
No, I wrote my first novel first person. I didn't know it was difficult.
It was so difficult for me because as I got into it, if she doesn't see it or know about it or learn about it, it doesn't happen. And there's all these supporting characters with all these complexities and stories. So it was really a challenge to figure out how to really authentically and seamlessly integrate their storylines only through Tabitha's perspective uniquely. I couldn't switch perspectives. It really had to come. So I had to be really inventive about how she found something out, or even the fun thing about it was when she's wrong. That was really fun because she's able to grow and learn, and the reader is able to kind of grow and also kind of judge her a little bit. Maybe they see things as she's recounting them, she gives her interpretation, but sometimes even the reader will know that she's wrong, but her perspective is so strong in that point, and she has some growth to still undergo. So that became fun, but it was really a challenge. And at one point I did regret it. I was like, oh gosh, I really would.
I can remember thinking that too. How do I let the reader know this happened when she isn't going to tell them
there's
it
no
happened?
way. Yeah.
And that's when I discovered, I could do split POV. I can have someone else tell their story from their point of view.
I'm like, why did I do that?
No one told me how hard. I just was like, I've been a journalist, and I thought, I am going to write first person, and I'm going to use bad words, and I'm going to have like this. Nobody told me. Okay, so we just segue nicely into writing process. Now, I know you've written 4 other nonfiction books, and being a lawyer, how did you manage? I mean, you said it was hard. We got that it's hard, but you didn't make it look hard. You made it look easy. Could you talk a little bit about your use of imagery and your writing process?
Well, I was an engineer undergrad, and so this was really a new world for me, and it took me a while just to build the confidence to know that I could write and that I had a story to tell, especially in the fiction space. I felt pretty comfortable with nonfiction because I can, set up a thought and explain it very well. But it's a completely different skill set to bring about this imagery and a world and create an experience for someone. And I did build the confidence. It took a realization that writing, for me, my view of it, it's not some kind of bestowed gift from the gods, that golden rain landed upon your head. All of a sudden you're the anointed one that
glitter.
A unicorn sneezed on you, So I realized this is a craft that I can learn. And so once I kind of knew that and internalized it, I went about learning the craft. And the other thing that I did, and now I'm realizing this in retrospect, I started doing a lot of internal work of just understanding my experience as a human being in perspective, and really doing the internal investigation of just people, how we're structured, why do we respond in one way or another to things, and what makes this person upset, and what are the mechanics of the human experience. I really spent a lot of time thinking that through. So for me, a lot of the fun has been character development and putting these people together. And I just kind of have a framework about who these people are and what makes them who they are, and gives them their unique experience of them. And the other part of it was trying to think in a fresh way about writing. I had to really think about, I started researching, I'm such a nerd. I was like, what is her novel? Like, what is a novel? Like, what was the origins of a novel? Why do we call it a novel?
You and Patty are going to tell off screen.
I was such a nerd. I was like, why is it structured like this? And so I thought, okay, well, what's really happening in the reader's mind? How can I make this its own experience? And so I just deconstructed all of that and crafted what I wanted to create as an experience for the reader. And that made it exciting for me. So that's kind of how I thought about it. I wanted it to feel like it was immersive. I wanted it to feel emotionally evocative. I read a lot of erotica. I wanted to, and classic erotica like Anais Nin, and because that, people like, it's kind of this whatever, taboo world, but I thought, wow, this is so ingenious that somebody can use words in a page to create a visceral reaction in someone's body. We're aroused by reading this. So I studied that, and I wanted to bring the emotionally evocative energy into what I was writing. So I don't know. I wanted to do something cool.
Well, we're all pretend psychoanalysts, so we just dive into why and
And that makes me wonder how much, because you said you totally nerded out. How much did your first draft change to the finished manuscript? I mean, was that one of these? How long start to finish, and what kind of changes evolved as you took, literally, like most of us do? I think we taught ourselves how to write a novel. Nobody knows how to write a novel until you write a novel.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, it was kind of like that, and I realized I really operate well with structure. So the engineer in me makes the outline and the structure, and then there's a creative, I'm not writing into a void. So I feel so much more comfortable having an outline, knowing where I'm going, knowing the story's going, knowing where the reader is in different points. So it's stretched out for me, and then that makes me excited to write forward. And then I feel comfortable and confident in writing. So it took me about 2 years all together. The first draft for me was really a detailed outline. And my first 7 drafts were creating this outline. Yeah. Oh yeah. I write in this outline form. I have a story structure. I have an arc. I know mapping wise the emotional arc of the story where I'm taking the reader. So I really think it through about what this journey is for the reader in the outline before I ever write the words. So,
and do you storyboard?
I sometimes I do all kinds, whatever. I've tried so many different things. I've done the note cards. I've done every process. I tried all of it at the very beginning, and to figure out what was going to work for me. And so I now do kind of a blend. You do all of that, and then you throw it out the window and kind of go back to the basics. So now I just have a really tight story structure, and then I focus on the emotional arc because I kind of want the reader to go. There's emotional intensity, but that builds to this payoff. And the other thing that I realized perspective wise, if I'm doing something traumatic, like I'm going to take the reader through something, I'm never going to leave raw trauma or unprocessed trauma or put that in my work.
Okay.
I don't write like that. Sometimes there's some, authors that's their thing, they'll put the trauma and it's just there and it's raw, but I don't do a raw unprocessed trauma. I always bring it to some kind of
circle
practice, and completion point. So I don't write about anything I haven't processed.
Wow. I feel like that was our writing tip.
But
it's not. I'm going to ask you.
There's more.
There's more. In both of the novels, there's a solid thematic thread about getting rid of assumed identities and how to stand in your own power, how to define life on your own terms. whether it's how you wear your hair to the people you choose to love. And it's a lifetime of work, as we all know, because we're doing it ourselves. So talk to us about this. Was it a theme that rose up as you wrote, or one that you went in wanting to portray?
When I wrote this story, I wanted to have a sort of objective reason to center a Black female protagonist, because I didn't want to just write about a Black woman just to have done it. I wanted it to have meaning within the story and be part of the lesson that the reader is getting. And so thinking about it, it's a human story. And the societal layer of race, the societal layer of gender, what does that impose? It imposes these kind of made up stories that tell us who we're supposed to be, and in some way who we are, why who we are is not enough. And so, you amplify that with gender, you amplify that with race, and you've got this person who's got to fight those two things. That's the foundation of the human journey in this story. So I wanted it to be a authentic lesson to learn from this particular perspective and this particular protagonist that anybody can learn. It's not just a Black woman's story, it's a human story, but Tabitha's the right teacher. And what's the right lesson that Tabitha is the perfect teacher for us to learn? And that's about authenticity. And it's about fighting through those layers. It's about breaking down those walls. It's about getting to the point where we're at the most fundamental place where we all connect and we're all speaking the same language and we understand each other viscerally. And so that's her journey. It's that journey towards authenticity. And it's the best feedback I get. I love this from hearing from readers from all over the place, from different perspectives, and just different genders, different orientations, different identities, and saying, wow, Tabitha and I on the surface were so different, but she is me on the inside. That's me. And so that's to me, then I'm like, okay, yes, this is what I intended to do. This is what I wanted us to understand, that in spite of what society tells us is so different, we're all feeling the same thing. It may be in different degrees, but we're all in the same struggle, and we can all support each other, especially once we know that what you're feeling is what I'm feeling. Like that's the same feeling. And it's the same struggle, it's the same journey, and we can support each other. We can relate to each other.
When I won't give any spoilers, but there's a very particular scene in Black Girls Must Be Magic, and I don't want to give it away, but I put the book down and I thought, what are the things I'm doing that are imposed from somewhere else? I mean, it made me put the book down and think about, I had to pick it back up to see what happened, but it made me, I was really curious how you came to that in it, or whether it rose up. So thanks for sharing that. It's really powerful.
Well, and I think it's so true what you said. I think, we talk about this a lot, that in fiction, we understand each other's stories in a way that sometimes it just doesn't happen in nonfiction. Like, it's just not the same thing. Like, we understand and connect to each other because we are the same. And it's just, it's magic to quote you. I have to ask you a super quick question. Do you have a new word?
Oh, yeah. What was I did? So I'll just tell you that my perspective on things it's 2 words. It's without regret. I mean, it's like YOLO is my word.
That's a good one.
But in context for this story, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of center the relationship between Tabby and her grandmother, I mean, culturally, that's a big thing. We definitely have in the Black culture, and in everybody's family too, but it's like you're not just in your generation. Like, you definitely have your grandparents, and it's very much that insight and that presence there. Like, it's not a Thanksgiving table if the grandparents or the uncles, like you've got it's family oriented in a lot of ways, and sometimes the family we create, but I wanted to show that because I just, the story in a vacuum of kind of, you see the women in their 30s and they're just in their 30s and they're single and living life. I didn't think that was authentic to Tabby, and that wasn't authentic to what my experience has been. And I hadn't seen so much of that. And so I wanted to show the experience with her grandmother. And the reason for that also for me is in my 30s, my grandmother went through a period of dementia. And she was in assisted living facilities. And so I would go to visit. So this is where I got some of this perspective from. And I remember in those spaces, I was thinking, wow, these are people who have lived so much of life and have so much perspective. These are treasures. And they're like kind of set apart from, our everyday interactions. And I just need to know what they're thinking. Like, I just need to know who's holding the keys to life, like everything. And so I would sit there and ask myself, what is this person thinking? Like, what's important to them? And I would try to project into that space. And what I realized is that they're not sitting there obsessing over the stuff that I think is important, or I was thinking is important in my 30s. Like, oh, I shouldn't have, said that in that meeting, or I wish I hadn't gone on a date with that guy, or I wish I hadn't drank so much at that party. It's like, no, they're thinking about the big things in life, and it's not. And I realized in that moment that regret is the most expensive thing that I could generate in my life. And I realized that in my 30s. And so I've been trying to live to minimize regret, because
That's awesome.
That's
Beautiful.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, we have so much more to talk to you about, but we love our live audience and they are rolling in with the questions.
They
Mary
really,
Kay?
yeah, we really are. I'm sorry I'm leaning in like an old lady, which I am. Joyce Merrill wants to know, back to the question of process, do you feel locked in once you start writing first person? Or do you, and I'm going to take it a little bit farther, do you feel free to, when you started writing, come to, oh, this character, I know more about her now than when I did when I started? What's your process on that?
I definitely have felt her growth, and so I had to allow that, and the series has to have that growth for her. And for me, the way that I view my characters, I mean, like, for me, the fun part is creating these people. And I'm just like, okay, these are people, and I'm putting them into play with each other in these situations and scenarios, and I can't wait to see what happens. Literally, that sounds like a crazy person, but like,
Same thing.
I am watching the scene play out in my mind with these people I've invented.
We're little gods.
We're speaking your language. It's fine.
Yep. You're among friends.
I'm like, we're the same kind of weird. So
That's a great title. Same kind of weird.
the same kind of weird. So, but it's, if I can't have a conversation with this person in my head, like, then I don't feel like I've done enough work to round them out as a character. So with Tabitha, that's kind of how I felt. And with the story, what was really important to me was to get past this, like, get past I'm fine. Because I think those are the worst two words ever invented in womanhood. Like, I'm fine. Like, no, you're not. And so I wanted to, right? So I wanted to get past I'm fine. And I realized the amount of fireballs I had to throw at these people to get them past I'm fine, and to get them to, like, finally be vulnerable and break down and show the dirty, the messy gook of the insides, and so that we can now really see what's going on, and so can they. So so that was one of the things with her that, I'm in the first book, oh my gosh, I'm like having to throw all, the kitchen sink. And as we're getting past it, getting in the second book, she's not at her lowest point anymore, but she's at this inflection point. Is she going to backtrack, for comfort, or is she going to keep pushing forward? And one of the things that I love about this character is that I find that there's still always that flame that she wants fulfillment. It's not getting extinguished no matter what I throw at her. It's like still that little flicker there, so I can push further, and she has further to grow. So I feel like the growth is very much authentic to her, and I think still first person it's the way to go now. It's really difficult again because all of the other characters, their storylines are still complex, and and there's one character in the second book who's not as present as she is in the first book, but she's going through a lot. And what I realized is that in life, this taught me something. sometimes when somebody's going through something in life, it looks like being a bad friend to you. And so I've got to write it like that. And people ask me, well, where is she in the second book? Like, she's going through something, and that's what it looks like. And so I have to feel comfortable showing that authentically, that this is what that looks like. It looks like self-care sometimes. When you're asserting your own self-care, it looks like you being a bad friend. And so, that's the truth of it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Okay, so we have another question from Anissa Joy Armstrong. She is saying, since you knew it was a trilogy going in, did that make it easier or harder to write these books?
I knew about like kind of halfway through the first book that this should be a trilogy. And I think it was partially because of the other characters. There's so much story there. So it made it easier because I didn't have to cram everything in that first book. I just knew that, okay, we can stop writing here. This is a natural conclusion to this part of the story. And now the whole arc has a beginning, middle, and end. And it was just great, especially kind of as a debut author, to have that space and to know early on, you have the space, let it breathe. You can let the story breathe. You can let it develop. And so
wrap it up. Yeah.
So it made it a lot easier that, I can revisit something, or I can just really let it play itself out and have a good time and learn along the way.
That's great.
Yeah, sometimes knowing that you're writing open-ended gives you a little bit more confidence to say, okay, in the next book, I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true. Jill Celeste has a great question for you. Did you find it hard to switch gears from writing nonfiction to fiction?
I did a little bit, but I had some runway over the time that I was learning how to craft a novel. And so it was a little bit difficult because I had to make sure that I had to even learn what it meant. We say show, don't tell. Well, I'm like, what does that mean? What does it even mean? So I think probably every writer has a definition for themselves of what that actually means. But I had to make sure that I had internalized my version of that, because it's very different in nonfiction. People want you to tell them, okay, that's what I'm talking about. Just get to the point. And in fiction, it's like people want you to show them. And so learning that distinction and making sure that I was in that space was really that was one of the bigger transitions for me.
That's really interesting.
Jayne, that's amazing. When I first heard show, don't tell, I was thinking, aren't they the same? What? I'm writing words. What? Anyway. Okay.
That's a whole book. It's such a deep concept. I'm like,
because even when you're showing, you're telling, and even when you're telling, you're showing.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
like, what does that mean?
So, okay, we love a good writing tip, and you've given us a ton already, but could you share one of your favorite writing tips with our viewers and with us?
Well, this is really rudimentary, but I have to remind myself of this all the time. Don't edit in drafting. And that is my writing tip. And just write through. Yep. Just write through and be forgiving and give yourself grace in the writing process, because excellence happens, like the real writing happens in editing. And so I talk to a lot of people who feel like they have a story in them, but they're like, I could never, and they have, partially completed manuscripts, or they don't get to the finish point. My one tip is just give yourself grace and just write to the finish, at least for that one draft. Give yourself that.
And I think it gets harder every time to do that, because I think the editor on our shoulder, that little voice, gets louder and louder because we know it's coming, right? Yeah. So I think that gets harder with time. Do y'all feel like that?
Yeah.
I'm writing now, and I'm literally, this is what I tell myself in the mirror every day. Just write. Just write. Don't worry about it. Don't edit.
It's hard though, especially when you're like, I really needed to like nail that line at the end of that chapter, and that's not it. And I'm like, I really want to spend 7 hours on that line right now, but I also need to write the book. So it's hard.
I don't have an urge to edit as I go as much, but I have a lot more self-consciousness about my writing than I used to. Like, I think I used to just be able to put the words on the page and realize I would fix them. And now that I've been doing this for so long, you just, I don't know, like you see all the missteps you're making along the way, but if you stop and correct them, I mean, you just slow way down, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. And there's that realization of like, oh, someone's going to read this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
like, oh, someone is going to give me a one.
I think that's the goal. Yeah.
Even if it's perfect, someone's going to give me 1-star review for that.
Somebody's going to give a 1 star. Somebody's going to do it.
That's Mary Kay Andrews, because she's never had a 1-star review.
Just so she can help us.
Joke.
Yeah.
Big joke. I don't actually need, I give myself 1-star reviews. So it doesn't even take mean anonymous hater Karens on the internet.
I do it to ourselves.
I do it. I mean, I get to the point where I can cripple myself with loathing and self-hatred for what I've written. And I'm making gagging noises as I write, but I
do it anyway.
I know.
Oh my God. The only way to do it is to do it.
Yeah.
It's worked okay.
Yeah. It's worked okay.
Well, Jayne, we usually ask authors to give us a book suggestion, and we'd love to do that. But there's a question the New York Times Book Review asks authors that we really love. What book might we be surprised to find in your library or on your nightstand?
Oh my gosh. What can I tell you is I'm looking at my bookshelf right now and I'm like, what would be surprising? I will tell you, I don't know if this would be surprising or not, but I really love like kind of not self-help, but I really love like esoteric and positivity. So one of my favorite books is Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks book. And I just find their work delightful, and it's so positive, and whether or not it's true and whether or not the premise is accurate or not, it's just like there's like a mantra she says, like, everything's always working out for me. Everything's always, so I'm just like, yes, everything's always working out for me. So I get positivity from their book. So maybe people would be surprised to know that book.
Okay, and who's the author again, Jayne? Would you repeat that?
It's Abraham Hicks is the author. I think I think they write as that. It's a whole complex. You know, she's supposedly channeling like this outer worldly, ultra wise being, and I believe it's Abraham Hicks, but it's Esther Hicks. So yes, it sounds wise and it sounds really positive. So I just like.
It cannot hurt to say that every day.
I read a lot of Gabrielle Bernstein, and she quotes Abraham Hicks like all the time, and a lot of her mantras are from. So I actually haven't read that book, but I feel like that's one of her mantras. It's like
it was. Oh my gosh, it was so instrumental for me in the like height of the pandemic, and I just needed something positive, and it was like, this is extra positive, and I had a little. My little mantras I would write in my journal, and it definitely helped. So
that's awesome. Okay, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for just another couple minutes, because we have one more thing we want to talk about, but we also have a couple quick announcements.
A new episode of our Friday Writer's Block podcast just dropped. Ron and I talked with Robert Dugoni about the staying power of stories, and it was so great. And this week, Ron and Patty will talk to audiophile editor Robin and audio narrator Fiona Hardingham in an episode titled, Are You Listening? Fiona read Patty's Once Upon a Wardrobe, and it won the coveted Earphone Award for Audiophile magazine. It's such an interesting conversation about audiobooks.
I think speaking of audiobooks, Patty, isn't one of your audiobooks nominated for an Audio Award, which is a huge, prestigious thing? I'm
really excited. It was my Audible original, Wild Swan, read by Cynthia Erivo. I mean, come on.
Wow.
Unbelievable. That's amazing.
In my world, she wins everything. She wins Broadway. She wins
audio winner.
Yeah, she's an all-around winner.
We have to stick an A in for like in the EGOT, right? Like there also has to be the Audie Award and like the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar.
They sent me this little. I'll put it on Facebook tomorrow. They sent me this little medal. It says Audie finalist, and of course the award ceremony is virtual. I'm like, the year I'm a finalist is virtual.
Oh, that's such a shame. Meg is saying we could call it the EGOT. That's what she just put in the comments. Anyhow, we also wanted to remind you, we talk each week about Loco Plus, which airs a lot of our back episodes. But they have, one of the reasons we're involved with them is because they air exclusive, fascinating content from local creators. So it's people who are kind of just at the beginning of their creative journeys, who are doing really special things and who are inviting you into their communities. So we're happy to be a part of that community, and we hope you'll check it out too. It's called Loco Plus, and it's just a cool place to be.
And now I want to remind you that about our Friends in Fiction official book club, which is separate from us, and it's run by our friends Lisa Harrison and Brenda Gardner. They are now more than 11,000 strong.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
So proud of
Yeah.
them.
And tomorrow, you don't want to miss the discussion with Jasmine Guillory about the wedding date. We've had Jasmine on as a guest before on the show, and she's delightful and funny and knows how to write a sex scene. Am I right, Jane? Have you read Jasmine?
I have. She does.
The girl can do it.
And Jane knows because she's read a lot of
TV.
She's read a lot of sex scenes. All right. And next week, right here, same time, same place, we'll have V.E. Schwab of the blockbuster The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And in the after show, we are going to have G.R. McAllister's new fantasy. We are so thrilled. She usually writes under Greer McAllister, and she has switched over to this fantasy series about a matriarchal queendom. I am so excited about this series. And she's going to join us on the after show. And the week after, on March 2nd, someone no one's ever heard of, Colleen Hoover.
I wish someone would buy her books,
I know.
I feel so badly for her. It's just like she's never on the top 5 spots of the Times list.
I know. Poor
All
thing.
the time. Top 5, yeah.
Top 4 of the 5.
Yeah, that's a guess all of you have been demanding.
Yes.
So we finally got V.E. Schwab, and right after that, Colleen Hoover.
We wrangled them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because we said Jayne Allen was coming on, and they were like, so are we.
Well, I'm in. Exactly.
So our schedule is always on the Facebook page and on our website.
Well, Jane, you are up. We have one last question for you. So we have a wonderful mutual friend, Zibby Owens, and we hear that you have a role at Zibby Books, her new imprint, and we want to hear all about it.
Well, I'm super excited. I don't know if you know about my personal journey, but I started out self-published and went to traditionally published. And along the way, I learned that I really wish that there were more ways to connect books with readers and more ways to bring more readers to more books. And I think there are a lot of people that are kind of sitting on the sidelines for various reasons. So I'm really excited to work with Zibby and the team in figuring out new ways to approach marketing and to try to create a bigger platform for the books that we love and to hopefully bring more books to more readers. So it's an exciting time and a wonderful, incredible team. And I just love Zibby. She's so creative and such a wonderful person.
Yes, the two of you together are going to be.
I was going to say, talk about a power pair.
Dynamo.
I know. Thank you so much for spending time with us and talking about being authentic and writing in first person and the terrors of it. And
The terrors.
before you say goodbye, can you tell everybody where to find you online?
Yes, I am most frequently on Instagram at Jayne Allen Writes.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to respond. If you tag me, I will see and I will try to repost. And so I encourage people to tag me and make it a conversation and a community. And I am at JayneAllen.com. So my mailing list is there and I do not send enough emails. So don't worry, you will not get spammed. In fact, you're probably mad. Like, why didn't you email?
Same.
I will improve the frequency, but that's right. I can be found.
Jayne, you are so much fun. And somebody just posted, you are a delight, and you are. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun.
You guys are fantastic. Thank you. This has been so much fun. So worth the sparkles.
I was going to say, you
So
brought the
glad you
sparkle
wore these
tonight. The girl brought the sparkle.
You brought the sparkle in more ways than one.
No,
Ways than one. Thank you, Jayne.
Thank you, Jayne.
Thanks, Jayne.
All right, everybody. Make sure you come back next week, same time, same place, and we'll welcome V.E. Schwab and G.R. McAllister. Good night, y'all.
Night.
Night. Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.
Aw.